Hey, what is up everyone? Welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to give you a detailed walkthrough of the new Cheese CTF room on TryHackMe. Now, generally, I don't like doing CTF or puzzly rooms because they're not realistic and they can sometimes just be frustrating. Just to me, that's not for everybody. Some people enjoy them. I personally prefer not to do them, but this room was unique. Although it is more of a CTF or puzzle, even by the author's own admission on Discord, when I was asking about it, I found some unique challenges and unique aspects about this machine that I haven't seen elsewhere. Now, I do want to give a full disclosure. Usually when I do these things, I go through them live. Well, I am technically live on stream right now, but I go through them blind. I don't prep ahead of time and I just stumble my way through it. I have gone through this room ahead of time, but I don't have any notes. We're going to make the notes as we go, so I'm sure I'll still make some mistakes and stumble through things, but I have gone through this room. So if you see me go through it maybe a little bit quicker than usual, it's not because I'm way smarter than you. It's just because I had the opportunity to go through this offline when I was trying to solve it when it first came out. And here's the other cool thing. This room is completely free. So I will drop a link to this room in the description of this video. For those of you watching this on YouTube, the standalone video, I almost always forget to actually include that link. So if you're watching this video and there's no link to the room in the description, please let me know in the comment and I will edit the description and drop the link here. For those of you joining me on the live stream, let me just drop this link one more time. And there we go. We'll drop the link there. And I want to treat this kind of like a workshop. I want to bring you on this journey with me. So I will explain every step that we do and we'll work through this machine together, hopefully in a way that's not just me blindly showing you every command, but explaining my methodology and my reasoning behind what I am doing. So without any further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. Here is the room. I did reset my progress. We have the IP. So if you are watching on YouTube and you haven't already, hey, go ahead and start the machine and then pause this video and then unpause when everything is good to go. But hey, we got Tiberius. What is up, Tiberius? Thank you for jumping in chat. I will just say, guys, in just a few weeks, I'd have to even check my own YouTube channel. But if you go to my YouTube channel and go to live streams, upcoming live streams, me and the one and only Tiberius are going to be doing a live stream pretty soon. And we're also giving away a 1-year subscription to TryHackMe. Only those who attend the live stream will be eligible. So make sure you come to that. It shall be a fun time. But like I said, I'll explain everything that I'm doing, hopefully a little more noob friendly as we work through this. And if you guys have any questions, if there's anything that's a little bit confusing, please let me know in chat. Or hey, if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube and there's something you didn't understand, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to reply and do my best to explain things. But the first thing that we are going to do after launching the machine is we will go ahead and grab the IP there. We'll open up our terminal, and the first thing we want to do is add the IP to what's called etc host on Linux. This is just how it resolves IPs to names. So if you think about your phone, the same way that your phone resolves a contact to a phone number, well, that's kind of like what etc host does. So we don't have to remember the IP every time. We're going to give it a name. So the way we can do that is we can do sudo. We can use vim or nano. I think nano is a little more noob friendly, so we'll use nano. But etc host, type in your password. And then we'll go down here. I'm just going to do Control-Shift-V to drop in the IP. Hit Tab on my keyboard to jump over here. And we'll just name this like cheese.thm. And then to save, you can see here it looks a little bit confusing, caret key X. The caret key just means the control key on your keyboard. So we'll do control key X. And it says, hey, do you want to save it? I'm going to click Y on my keyboard for yes. And then etc host, we'll just hit enter, and there we go. Now we can make sure we can actually ping the room, which we can. We can ping cheese.thm, and the other thing we want to do is get our notes set up. Now, it's less important what application you use for taking notes, and just more important that you're in a regular habit of taking notes as you go through machines. Even if you don't publish your notes, the more you write things down, the better you're going to learn the content yourself. So we will get our notes pulled up. I use Notion. You can see some of my previous notes here, and I'm just going to create a new page inside my on-prem notes as compared to my cloud ones, and we'll call this Cheese CTF and THM. We'll make this full width like so, and just full screen. So we have those initial notes set up. And now what I like to do is figure out, hey, what ports are open on this machine? And here's kind of the first gotcha when it comes to this machine, and you'll see it right away. So if we throw something like RustScan at it, which do I not have installed? I don't have installed. So I can show you how to install RustScan. We can also do it with Nmap. Let's just do Nmap right now because it's not going to be helpful to us. So if we do something like Nmap And we'll just do this typical InMap scan at cheese-thm, and we'll do T5 to make it go a little bit faster, and -V for verbose mode, and we'll just do that. You will notice insanity right away. So on most machines, you don't see this. Most machines, you might see port 80 for a web server and port 22 for SSH open, but on this machine, literally every single port is open. I'm actually curious about the authors, what they use to do this, because I know Black Hills InfoSec, they have something out. I think Black Hills InfoSec, I'm just type every port open, I'm sure it will pop up. Is it port spoof? I think is what it's called. I'm curious if they use port spoof or something else here, but this is actually a tool by Black Hills InfoSec on port spoofing. And I think what their port spoof tool does is exactly this. It will show every port is opening. So when an attacker is trying to enumerate your machine, well, they can't figure out what is actually going because every port is going to appear to be open and every port is going to look like there is something on it. So I don't know if that's what the authors of this machine did, but I found this interesting. I've never actually seen this on a machine. I remember reading about Black Hills InfoSec's tool, never experimented with it myself. And when I do pen testing, I do all kinds of pen tests, guys. So I do web apps, APIs, networks, externals, and internals. I do Azure and AWS. I do mobile apps. But when I'm doing an external pen test in particular, I'm often using Nessus, which is kind of like InMap on steroids to see what ports are open. And I've never seen a client have this in place where it just shows every single port that is open. So I found that interesting, wanted to showcase that. So yes, every port is open. Make sure I'm not missing anything in chat. Peace out, DJ BSec, if you haven't already left. Thank you for stopping by. And Zeddy said, hello, was Nano, not V. You can use either one. Nano, I think, is more noob friendly, so that's why I'm showcasing Nano. But there we go. Every port is open. But one thing that you can do, and this is what I did when I was going through this myself live, is I always just assume, hey, there's probably a web server, and we can confirm that by going to cheese.thm. And there you go. We do have a web server running here, and we have a little bit of information. So let's go ahead and begin with some web server enumeration. Now, you can use a bunch of tools for this. You can use Burp Suite, which I don't even think. So guys, I shared before, this VM was broken, and that's why I'm streaming later. Now, you can use Burp Suite. I use Burp Suite Professional Edition when I do actual web app pen testing. I don't think anything really beats Burp App Pro, but I know for a lot of you, you don't have access to the professional edition of Burp and you don't want to pay for it. And Community Edition is a little bit limited, primarily because when you do an intruder attack on Burp Suite Community Edition, it rate limits you significantly. You can, of course, use like Burp Suite, what's the intruder or something. I'm trying to think what it's called, but essentially it's a Python script that you can script it out. But once again, not super noob friendly. So one tool that I've been using is Kaido. Now, Kaido is a newer web app proxy tool. It's kind of like Burp, written from the ground up in Rust. It's of course missing a lot of the features of something like Burp Pro has, but I enjoy it. I like the UI. I think it's good. But once again, just saying, like, for my actual day in, day out web app pen testing, I use Burp Pro. So if you do want to get into the field as a web app pen tester, Burp Pro is still the best tool to get familiar with, and I do think it's worthy of your investment. That being said, I will show you guys Kaido because it's a little more affordable. Turbo Intruder, that's what it is, Tiberius. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. All right, let me go ahead and install this. You guys can watch the process. I just had to authenticate. dpkg-i, Kaido desktop 41. Whoops. We'll see if this works. Otherwise, we'll drop back to Burp. So I shared before, strange issues with this VM. So I don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. There we go. There's Kaido. I'm going to stop sharing again just while I authenticate. And that's the other kind of downside of Kaido. It's actually Kaido. I always say Kaido, but that's the wrong way to say it. Is you need an account and like to authenticate. Whereas Burp is just like, hey, you just pull it up and you're good to go. So each tool has its own unique strengths and weaknesses. All right, here we go. We got Kaido open. I'll go ahead and create a project and we will call it Cheese CTF. We'll create that. We'll go over to Intercept. We'll just open in the built-in browser. And now we're ready to intercept requests, and we can go over to cheese.thm. And there we go. We are at the cheese shop. Now, before we dive into our specific enumeration, what I like to do is make a checklist. So we'll say web app enumeration, and we'll give it port 80 there. And I like to make a checklist, like I said before. This is especially important for those of you who are studying for exams like the OSCP that are notorious for rabbit holes. If you do not make a checklist before starting to enumerate, you will often fall into a rabbit hole, and then your mind's no longer going to be fresh. You're going to forget what you were doing. You're maybe going to fail the exam. You're not going to be able to pwn that machine. What I think is good practice, especially on a CTF, is make a checklist of the things you want to check before you start checking them so you don't get distracted. So a few things that we'll want to check on a typical web app CTF is we'll use something like dir search for directory. For directories, we can do some vhost fuzzing to see if there's any virtual hosts. We can just browse the website, use the website. We can check source code. Sometimes there's silly things on a CTF. You can check robots.txt and just general functionality. So that's kind of a good starting point. We could also run nuclei or nicto at it, but usually an overkill for your typical CTF. But let's go ahead and get some of these scans running before we look at the website ourselves. So we'll drop over to here, and I'll just call this dir search. And do I have dir search installed? I do not. So we'll go ahead and install that. You could also use dirbuster, gobuster. I just prefer dir search. All right, we'll do dir search. I think it's -u, cheese.thm. We can just use the built-in word list, and we'll see how that works for us. Dir search, we can also look for vhosts. Vhosts are almost like different websites that share the same IP. They're called virtual hosts. So we'll open another tab, and we'll just call this vhost fuzzing. And I created a tool for this that is really just a script kiddie tool because I always forget the freaking syntax for using fuff to find this. So if we go to my GitHub, nope, that's not my GitHub. That's cool. If we go to my GitHub, there's a little script here for vhost fuzzing. Once again, it's not even that cool. It's literally just a wrapper around fuff because I always forgot the syntax when I'm doing vhost fuzzing. And other tools besides fuff, I just seem to do them wrong and they don't find the stuff I'm looking for. So we'll just do nano vhost, if I could type, vhost fuzzer.sh, paste that in, make it executable. And if we run help, it tells you exactly what you need to do. So we're going to do vhost fuzzer. Our domain is cheese-thm. Our word list we can use, there's better word lists, but this will be good enough. Our URL is http cheese.thm. Our FS filter will just say 1. We don't know what that is until it runs it. And I'll show you what it means by FS filter in just a second. All right, you'll see that our size for any vhost that doesn't exist is 1759. That's our FS filter, or filter by size. So we just want to rerun this. And for FS, we'll do 1759. And we'll let that do its thing in the background. Now you can see this has found some information here. And it didn't find what we actually need. I wonder if I ended up using a different word list when I was doing the fuzzing initially. But we can look at some of this stuff. In the meantime, let me throw another word list at it. We'll do user share word list, dirbuster, directory list, 2.3 medium, and we'll let that one go. And now we can go ahead and look at the website, and we'll check out some of these things that are open. So here we have, ladies and gentlemen, the cheese shop. We have our cheese selection. Now, one thing I always check right away is I try to open images in new tabs and see if we have directory listings. So if we go back to the upper directory, such as images, we do have directory listing. Now, every once in a while, honestly, not very often, every once in a while on something like an external pen test, I'll see directory listing that might expose something sensitive. So it's just something to check, something to maybe make the client aware of. In this case, it literally is just an images directory. We do have some version information. So if this is a pen test, this would be like an informational vulnerability. We would report to the client of information disclosure. But for this, nothing super interesting. We just have some, cool images of cheese. Now, you want to just use the website and see what functionality we have. Another thing to look for is any type of username enumeration. So often websites will have a staff page and they'll say, hey, here's our staff, here's our emails. We might be able to use that information for some password spraying attacks, username enumeration. Here we have an info@thecheeseshop.com, which is that a legit website? Oh, it's available for sale, ladies and gentlemen. So if you want to be the proud owner of the cheeseshop.com, you can get a price in less than 24 hours. But obviously not with this. So we have products that just goes on there. About us just does that. Contact just does that. We do have a login screen here. Now, when it comes to a login screen, there's things we can do. One thing I've noticed on CTFs is just try basic passwords. So like admin password, things like that. Admin, right? Please check username and password. You can route this through Kaido just to see what it looks like. We'll turn that on and we'll do admin, hit login, go over to Kaido, turn that over to replay. We can turn queuing off and we can close this out. There we go. And hit send. All right, login failed. Please check your username and password. We could try some basic fuzzing for like SQL injection. If you do like a single quote and you get a 500 error, it might be vulnerable to SQL injection or SQL injection. So you guys don't pitchfork me, but you can see it doesn't seem to be vulnerable to SQL injection. Another thing that you might run into, but probably not as often, is no SQL injection or not. Yeah, no SQL. And I think the syntax for that would be like this, not equal. So username does not equal. And we can just put like hack smarter in there and password. Well, we could just try that for no SQL injection and it doesn't work. Sometimes maybe the password is vulnerable, but I've only seen this on a few CTFs. There we go. Hunter said Kaido, Burp Community, or Zap. Out of those three options, I would say Kaido, just because you're not rate limited on intruder, or automate is what Kaido calls it. But if you add Burp Community Pro, or not Burp Community Pro, Burp Pro into the mix, I would say Burp Pro. Burp Pro is still the standard tool for web app pen testing for a reason. Has a lot of really good extensions around, and it just works well. So for actual web app work, Burp Pro is what I recommend. For just CTFs and live streaming like this, I use Kaido because it's a little more accessible and affordable to people. I used to use Burp Pro, but that was the comment I always got. I was using features that are only available in Burp Pro, and people were like, hey, I can't follow along because I don't have Burp Pro. So that's why I use Kaido. And I met the developer at DEF CON, one of the main developers, super nice, genuine guy. Hey, Tyler, I read your findings on Randall's website about the Go CMS vulns you found. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, those were I had some CVEs. Tiberius said Kaido doesn't even come close to comparing to Burp Pro, in my opinion. I agree. And I bet I don't even use even half the features in Burp Pro. Like I use a few extensions and do some intruder stuff, but Burp Pro also just added some API scanning stuff. I haven't used that much. Tiberius, I'm curious. Do you use the API scanning feature at all in your actual web app pen testing work? I still just like use Postman and route it through Kaido, or not Kaido, Burp Pro when I do APIs. But I've heard their API scanner tool thing might be cool. I just haven't even messed around with it. But all right, we have this login fail. So not much interesting on this login page. We don't seem to have username enumeration, although we don't know what a valid user is. But what I mean by that, one thing I always check is see if we have basic username enumeration. So for example, if there was a username admin and we did the username admin, it might give us a different error message where it would say login failed, incorrect password. Whereas if it's an incorrect username, then it says, please check your username and password. So when you're at a login screen, that's one thing to test for. Even a bug bounty, some bug bounties would consider that a valid finding, but on a pen test in particular of username enumeration with lack of rate limiting. So if you can like spray a login page with, 100 requests back to back to back, and there's no rate limiting in place, and you can discern whether or not a user exists, that's an informational or maybe a low finding on a pen test. So just something to be aware of, but not going to be super helpful for us on this. So you can see there's not much on our cheese page. And we can't really look at other ports because every single port is open. There's a few things we haven't done yet. I said we would check the source code. So if we look at the source code, we can see there's a HTML comment here that they added a login link, but that login link doesn't do anything for us. Other than that, there's not much interesting. We can also look at the source code on the login page to see if there's anything interesting. And you can see not much interesting here either. We can also check things like robots.txt. Not usually a real world thing you're going to find now, at least from my experience. But every once in a while on a CTF, you'll see like some silly thing in robots.txt, which is always the downside of CTFs. But there were some other things that this found. So we have this orders.html. So we can go to that, and if we view page source here, this is interesting because it says orders, the Cheese Shop admin panel. Order content goes here, but we don't have any order content. If we could make orders, like somehow submit orders, and it's reflected here, we could check things like cross-site scripting or even server-side template injection if there's templating going on in the background, but there's no functionality to submit orders. We also have users.html, so we can check that out. And same thing here. If we do view page source, we don't have much, but it does say the Cheese Shop admin panel users, the Cheese Shop admin panel. So interesting behavior, but nothing that's going to allow us to really pwn the machine. And I'm just going to go ahead and move ahead. If you continue to do directory searching, this is part of the machine that I don't like, and it might just be me, but one of the areas, and I even mentioned this in my video I released, was that this week on TryHackMe versus Hack the Box. Hack the Box really shines when it comes to their standalone machines because they're much more realistic. They're not CTF-y, they're not puzzly, and like what I'm about to show you, there's no way this would ever pass on a Hack the Box machine, but TryHackMe machines tend to be a little more CTF-y, I think because the content is submitted by the community, whereas Hack the Box pays the people who create the machines. But if you continue to scan, eventually what you're going to find is messages.html, if my memory serves me correct. So if we go to that, you have this, which, like I said, you're not going to see this on a real pen test, ever. But if you click message, you get this, and it says, if you know, you know. So if you look at this, you can kind of get an idea of some things that we can do. So if I change this to Etsy password, you can see we have access to Etsy password. We have a ComT user. We can see if we get SSH creds, but we have file read right now on this PHP filter type stuff. But that part is, it is what it is. If you use the right word list, you will eventually find it. And I think I'm going off memory from when I went through this myself offline. I believe it was the word list I'm using now, this directory list 2.3 medium.txt that eventually found it. But I always find that part of CTF machines silly. But the part that I thought was cool is how you get RCE. So like I've heard about PHP filtering and using PHP filters to chain things together. And I've actually tried it on a few machines, but it wasn't the way in. But when I saw this, if we go back to that message, if you know, you know, and we have this PHP filter tag, I think they even teach this in the OSCP. I might be wrong. I don't know where I first learned about this myself, but there's a way to get RCE through PHP filters. And I discovered that right away. Like as soon as I saw PHP filters, like, oh, I know likely what we're doing, but I've never actually done it. So it was fun to get hands-on with that. So let me go ahead and show that off to you guys. Let me close out some of these extra tabs because I don't like having things open. But if we just do like PHP filter RCE, looks like Tiberius has done this. So he knows about the PHP filter chains. We can read about this a little bit. It gives you this like super long string that doesn't look like it should work, but it does work. There's a cool little Python tool. Is it this one? PHP filter chain generator, I think. Whoops. Yes. So we're going to use this tool. Let's go ahead and grab this tool. We'll copy it. We'll go over to our box. We'll just stop dir searching. Messages will eventually show up. Oh, Tiberius said I did a whole video on it and explain how it works. Here, we need to find the video. Is it on your YouTube channel? Let me pull it up real quick. Let's see if we can find them. All right, PHP filter. Here it is. Here's the whole video. Let me drop this in chat for you guys. What machine did you do this on? Oh, some TryHackMe rooms. Okay, cool. So it looks like Dogcat, Raven the Cat, maybe the file inclusion lab. I think I did the file inclusion lab. But okay, cool. Let me drop this in chat. You guys should all check this out because he's gonna explain it better than me. I just kind of stumbled my way through this, so I'm actually gonna watch this video myself. So there it is. If you guys don't sub, how do I not? Oh, I'm not logged in. I'm pretty sure I am subbed to you, Tiberius, when I'm actually logged in. But if you guys have not subbed to him, you should. All right, one of the best content creators by far out there, both on Twitch and YouTube. So make sure you check it out. But we're going to showcase this a little bit. So we'll grab this right here and we'll git clone it over to our PHP generator. We'll do Python 3 just to make sure it works, and it does. So now we can go back over and just read how to use the tool. So a CLI to generate PHP filters change, get your RCE without uploading the file if you control entirely the parameter passed to a require or an include in PHP. So we have a PHP chain you want to inject, and one simple POC to see if it works is doing PHP info, just your basic PHP info page. So we can just try that at first, and I'll show you like how crazy this looks. So we'll just copy that syntax right there, and we'll do that. And like, guys, look at this. What is this freaking madness when you see it? So what you do is we're going to copy all of this up to the PHP filter part of it. If I copy it, we'll copy the selection and we'll go over to this. We'll just capture this and throw it over in replay so we can play around with it a little more. Go to intercept, send that over to replay. Right, make sure it goes through. If you know, you know. So here we go. We'll grab this. I mean, look at that insanity. But you can see it actually does work. Now, you have to base64 decode it. Even then, it's a little bit odd looking up there. But you can see all the information here. We have our PHP version right there. We have Linux cheese CTF. We have the Linux version. And we kind of go through here and see everything here. This is the PHP info page. All with that crazy freaking insanity PHP filter real quick. So it gives us some information. Now, our goal is, of course, to get RCE. And if you just do like, I don't know, PHP filter shell, there was a good blog that I want to share with you guys that kind of walks through this. Was this the one? No, it wasn't. Well, maybe it was. We could try that one. We'll say reverse shell. I think this was the blog that I was looking at. It does a good job of walking through this, I think. At least one way to do this. So let me drop this in chat for you guys. Do pen tests pay attention to CVEs like this one? WebSocket protocol upgrade handling pertaining to Apache 4.41. I mean, it all depends whether it's exploitable, but generally it will get reported. So often the first step of a pen test, at least like an external pen test where you have a bunch of IPs in scope, is running Nessus against the IPs with a basic network scan, which will find some of those low-hanging bugs like CVEs that then will put on the report. But if you can't exploit it, you know, you lower the risk. But generally you're using Nessus as some first information gathering, both on an external and an internal pen test, and then you're trying to manually exploit things. On a web app pen test, Nessus isn't as helpful. You can do some stuff, but web apps, Burt Pro, their scanner is okay. My experience with Burt Pro's active scanner is it's a bunch of false positives with different reflected input. Curious, Tiberius, what you think about that, but I get a lot of false positives with the active scanner. Most of my vulnerabilities are found manually or like some weird business logic flaw on how the web app's set up that I'm able to abuse. But here we go. This kind of guides you through how to do this. So it says, first, create a shell script named revshell in the local machine. You've, of course, named this whatever you want, but we'll just follow these steps exactly as they are in the blog. So we'll just go up here and we'll do nano revshell. That, and of course, you want to replace it with RIP. So mine is 10.13.46.224. If you're following along, your IP is, of course, going to be different than mine. We'll save that. Go back to our blog, and it says, then create a chain using your generator. So you can see all this is doing a curl request to our rev shell and then piping it over to bash to run it. So we can give that a shot for our PHP reverse shell generator. And I'm just we'll call this our web server. I'll just make that open there, and we'll call this terminal for now. And we'll cd to our PHP reverse shell. And we'll, of course, update this again with RIP 10.13.46.224, like so. That's going to give us our chain. And what did I call my port in RevShell? Port 444. So then we will do netcat listener on 444 so we can catch the shell. And now we're going to copy this crazy wizardry, freaking long, insane PHP filter. If you're curious how and why this works, well, to be honest, I am too. And my plan is to watch Tiberius's video so I better understand PHP filters and exactly like what's going on in the background with these kinds of attacks. So once again, if you don't watch that video, you should. I'm for sure going to check it out myself. But we'll grab that. Copy all this, paste all that in like so. That all looks good. And we will hit send. And when we hit send, our hope is, well, oh, gosh, I'm dumb. So you can't do a curl request to your machine without first starting a web server, right? So what might be helpful is if we host a web server. So let's host a very simple Python web server on port 80. And, you know, let's try that again. There you can see it gets our reverse shell, should pipe it out. And now we have a shell. If we ls, you can get the user flag. I think if we go to home, ls cd comty, do we have user flag? And there it is right there. Pretty sure we can read it. .text, and we should be able, here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Let me make sure that does work, that we have permission. Oh no, permission's denied. All right, cool. So instead, I'll show you what you have to do to get comty access. I just didn't want to show the flag on screen. When I know what I'm doing, like I've already done the machine, I try not to showcase all the flags. The creators usually don't like that. But if we go to comty's home file, there's something, again, very CTF-y, because you're not going to see this in the real world. Oh, Tiberius said, I don't get that many false positives with the scanner, but I do have a bunch of extensions to add to it. Tiberius, do you have any videos on what extensions you use for Burt Pro? Otherwise, I'll just ask you that when I interview you in a few weeks. And I'll find out myself. But one thing that's, once again, not realistic is we are www.data, which I guess is realistic if you get a web shell. But as www.data, I think we can write to the SSH folder of the comty user, which, once again, not going to be a standard setup that you're going to ever see in the real world. I don't know why it would be that way, but if we lsla, oh, what did I just do? Why did I cd out? Because I'm dumb. That's why. And we have authorized keys, and you can see that we can read and write to authorized keys, which there's literally no reason we should be able to do that, but it is what it is. Let me cat out home, Tyler, SSH. Oh, I don't even have it. So we'll do SSH keygen like so. And it's just going to give us a private and public key, which we need. All of this is fine. We should just like do everything. There we go. Now if I cat home Tyler SSH, our public key like so, we will grab our public key, go over to our terminal, and we can just echo our public key into authorized keys like so, and then we should be able to SSH just comty at cheese.thm. It will automatically use our private key. And there we go. We now have SSH access to the machine as CompT. And now, if you wanted to, you could cat user.txt, but I'm not going to show you the flag. Even though I'm showing you step-by-step how to get the flag, there is something worthwhile in going through the process yourself. So even if you're brand new to this and you're just following along with my video, seriously, do it yourself. Follow along with me, but have hands on keyboard and type the same commands and go through all the same process. That's one of the best ways that you can learn. Tabir says, a good idea for a video, to be honest. Yeah, I'll watch it. I'm looking forward to it. Consumer Extraordinaire said, much of this is still a bit over my head. Is it still worth watching? Or would my time be better spent working on acquiring the prerequisite knowledge? I think it's still worth watching. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the dude making the video. I think it's worth watching because the more you're exposed to things like SSH and reverse shells, and you just see some of the syntax, the more you'll begin to recognize some of these patterns that we look out for on CTFs or in the real world. So although you might be new, and this may sound like foreign language to you, take notes of everything you do not understand. So when I use a word, let's just say reverse shell, and let's say that's brand new to you, hey, go to Google and say, hey, what is a reverse shell? Or when I say SSH, I just said I gave myself SSH access, pause the video and do some Googling. What is SSH? What does it allow me to do? And so don't just listen blindly and kind of have the material in you. Digest the material, chew on it, ask questions. It's one of the best ways that you can learn, whether you're watching me or someone like Tiberius or TCM streams, any of those people, Al Hazard, like all of those people who stream. Pause videos, ask questions, or if you're watching live, ask questions in live. Even if I don't answer your question right away, there's a bunch of people in chat who would be more than happy to answer your question. Okay, anyways, here is our user.txt flag. I'm not going to showcase that, but one of the best things you can do when you're doing a CTF in particular is when you get access, you do sudo-l. Now, sudo means super user do. And it's just like, hey, as an admin, can I run anything as an administrator on this machine? And -l means list what I can run. So if you do sudo-l, you can see pretty clearly we have some interesting things that we can do here. I want to hack my boyfriend's PC. You do that. Let me know how that goes for you. But we can see without a password, so without knowing CompT's password, which we don't know, we just have SSH access, we can reload the daemon, we can restart exploit timer, we can start the exploit timer, and we can enable exploit timer. So even if you're like brand new to CTFs, you might be able to read context clues and think, maybe I have to do something with something called exploit timer, right? So if we go over to CD, is it Etsy, systemd, I think, and then system is where these services are. And if we cat exploit.timer, you can see we have an exploit.timer, but in addition to a timer, there's a .service. These kind of go together. So if we cat exploit.service, you can see what this does. It is an exploit service. Once again, not something you're probably going to see in the real world, but it is going to copy the XXD binary, put it in opt, and then put the suid bit on it, which means it allows anyone to run it as the sudo user. No idea why anyone would do that in the real world, but hey, this is a CTF, and I guess that is how it works. But let me show you what happens now. If we try to run these commands, so we don't need to reload anything because we haven't made any changes, but if we try to restart the exploit timer, if we do sudo bin systemctl restart exploit.timer, as Tyler's lawyer, my client doesn't condone hacking without consent. That is true. You're right. But it says, hey, failed to restart exploit timer. Unit exploit timer has a bad unit file setting. See system logs and systemctl status exploit timer for details. So systemctl status exploit.timer. And it just says bad setting. It has a bad unit file setting. So let's look at it again. So cat exploit.timer. You can see our timer literally doesn't have anything here. So if you just do some Googling on this, actually, I bet ChatGPT could tell us what's wrong with this. Before I tell you what's wrong, let me show you one way that you can use ChatGPT. We'll grab this, and I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment while I authenticate to ChatGPT. Have to log into everything since my VM broke. So give me a moment. Almost there. Have to MFA it. Okay. All right, let's see if GPT would be able to help us with this. If we didn't know what we're doing, or if we're new, we'll say, hello, I am working on a CTF that requires this service to run. What is wrong with it? It won't run. It just errors out. We'll see if GPT knows it. Kurt Parsons said, Parrot or Kali on your opinion? They're just different tools. I use both occasionally, but Kali is more mature and less buggy, less issues. So you can also just use Ubuntu and just install the tools that you want. So look at this. The issue with your .timer file is the onboot sec field, which is currently empty. This field is required to define the amount of time after the system boots when the timer should trigger. To fix this, you need to specify a valid duration for onboot sec. For example, if you want the timer to trigger 5 seconds after boot, you can modify it as follows. Onboot sec 5 seconds, you can set the time in different units, etc., etc. And then we need to run those commands that we just saw that we can run as sudo. So this is a pretty good hint that we're looking at the right stuff. So let's go back over to this and let's make that change. We'll do nano exploit.timer, which there's no reason we should be able to modify this, but if you run linps, you'll notice that it points this out right away that you can modify this. We'll do 5 seconds, just like it said, and we'll save it. And now if we do sudo-l again, we can literally run these commands. So we'll do sudo bin systemctl daemon reload. Then we'll do sudo bin systemctl restart exploit.timer, like so. And if we cd over to opt, I don't know if you have to start it. There we have xxd, and we're almost to the finish line now. If we just go to, whoops, a beautiful website is called GTF Opens, which if you look up different binaries like xxd, we can see ways you might be able to use it for privilege escalation. And since it has the SUID bit set, we can basically read any file that we want right here. So you can see file to read, so we can just read the root flag. And I'll show you that real quick. If we do xxd, we can read etc shadow as a quick proof of concept, right? So if I do etc shadow, which is only readable by the root user, and then what we just pipe it out, we can read etc shadow. Now, in order to get the root flag, it would be pretty easy. You just do the same command here, but you would do root.text, and that would give you the root flag. There's some other things that you might be able to do and get some other information to get a more stable shell, maybe read some SSH keys. But that is how you would get the root flag for this machine and ultimately complete the CTF. Now, I am going to make sure I'm right on that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, hit enter. And yes, when you run that, you do get the final flag, but I want you to do the work yourself. So I'm not going to show you either the user flag or the root flag, although my video showed every step along the way. Once again, I think it's important that you go through this process yourself and just get hands-on keyboard practice as you type in these commands and enumerate and do some digging on your own in order to complete this machine. So hey, hope you found this helpful as you've been going through this Cheese CTF machine. Hopefully you learned something in the process, and I will catch you guys in the next one.